The Pacific Ocean stretches west from the coast of Mexico without interruption. There are no islands for thousands of miles. The continental shelf drops away quickly. Within a few kilometers of shore, the water reaches depths that exceed 2,000 meters. The town of Costa Azul sits on this coast in the state of Chiapas. It is a fishing village. Small boats leave before dawn and return in the afternoon. The fishermen work the deep waters where yellowfin tuna and mahi-mahi gather along thermal breaks and current lines. The boats are fiberglass skiffs, most between 20 and 25 feet in length. They carry outboard motors, ice chests for the catch, and minimal navigation equipment. Some have radios. Some do not. The work is simple and has remained largely unchanged for decades. The ocean here is governed by the North Equatorial Current, which flows west toward Asia. Surface speeds average between 1 and 2 knots, but the current is persistent. Anything that enters it moves steadily away from land. There are no rescue services patrolling these waters. The nearest Coast Guard stations are located hundreds of miles north or south. Commercial shipping lanes pass far offshore, following routes that avoid the shallower continental margins. The distance from the Mexican coast to the nearest landmass to the west is approximately 5,000 nautical miles. That landmass is the Marshall Islands, a scattered chain of atolls in the Central Pacific. Between Mexico and the Marshall Islands, there is only open ocean. This is where the story begins. José Salvador Alvarenga was born in El Salvador in 1975. He left his country in his 20s and moved north to Mexico. The reasons for leaving are not well documented. He settled in coastal Chiapas and found work as a fisherman. By 2012, he had been fishing the Mexican Pacific for more than a decade. He lived in Costa Azul and knew the waters well. He was considered skilled. Other fishermen spoke of his ability to locate fish and his willingness to venture farther offshore than most. Alvarenga worked alone much of the time. He owned no boat but was hired by boat owners who needed crew. The arrangement was common. He would take a percentage of the catch. On good days, this provided enough income to live. He was 47 years old in November 2012. He had a daughter in El Salvador whom he supported with remittances. He spoke with her occasionally by phone. His life in Mexico was solitary but functional. The boat he worked on most frequently was a 24-foot fiberglass skiff. It belonged to a man named Willie. The boat had a single outboard motor and a large icebox built into the center. There was no cabin. The hull was open to the sky. Alvarenga preferred deep-sea trips. He would travel 30 to 50 miles offshore, sometimes farther. The fish were larger there. The work was harder but the potential earnings were better. He understood the risks. Weather could change quickly. Motors failed. But he had always returned. He had no formal training in navigation or meteorology. His knowledge came from experience. He read the sky and the surface of the water. He knew when conditions were shifting. In mid-November, he agreed to take a companion on a fishing trip. Ezequiel Córdoba was 22 years old. He had worked with Alvarenga before but was less experienced. He knew the basics of handling lines and processing fish. He agreed to join the trip on short notice. The departure was planned for the early morning of November 17. The forecast was acceptable. There were no storm warnings along the coast. Alvarenga and Córdoba loaded the boat with supplies, ice for the fish, plastic containers for water, some food, and basic tackle. The boat carried a two-way radio and a GPS unit. The motor was a 75 horsepower Yamaha outboard. Fuel capacity was limited. They carried enough for the trip out and the return, with little reserve. They left Costa Azul before dawn. The ocean was calm. They traveled west, moving beyond the sight of land within 2 hours. Alvarenga was searching for schools of mahi-mahi and tuna. He navigated by instinct and the movement of birds. By midday, they were approximately 65 miles offshore. The water was deep blue. They began fishing. The catch was good initially. They pulled in several mahi-mahi and filled part of the icebox. The wind began to shift in the afternoon. Clouds appeared on the western horizon. Alvarenga noticed the change but continued working. The catch was strong. He wanted to maximize the haul before returning. By late afternoon, the wind had increased. The sea began to build. Alvarenga made the decision to head back. They secured the catch and prepared to start the motor. The motor turned over but did not engage properly. Alvarenga tried again. The engine sputtered and died. He checked the fuel line and the carburetor. Córdoba worked the pull cord repeatedly. The motor would not start. The wind continued to rise. The first heavy drops of rain began to fall. The storm arrived fully by evening. The wind came from the southwest, driving waves across the beam of the boat. Rain fell in sheets. Visibility dropped to nearly zero. Alvarenga and Córdoba worked to keep the boat stable. They threw out a sea anchor fashioned from rope and plastic containers. It provided minimal drag. The boat rose and fell with each swell. Water poured over the sides. They bailed continuously. Córdoba used a plastic bucket. Alvarenga worked the bilge by hand. The radio had been stored in a compartment that was not waterproof. When Alvarenga retrieved it, seawater had entered the casing. The unit was dead. The GPS unit suffered the same fate. Both devices became useless within the first hours of the storm. The catch they had worked to secure became a liability. The fish in the icebox added weight. The boat sat lower in the water. Each wave brought more seawater aboard. Alvarenga made the decision to dump the fish. He and Córdoba lifted the lid of the icebox and threw the entire catch overboard. The storm continued through the night. There was no sleep. They sat in the open hull, exposed to wind and rain. The temperature dropped. Both men were soaked. Córdoba began to shiver. By dawn, the worst of the wind had passed, but the rain continued. The sky remained dark. The storm was not a single event but a system that stretched across hundreds of miles. They remained inside it for 5 days. During those 5 days, the boat drifted west. The current carried them steadily away from the coast. Without a working motor, they had no means of propulsion. The sea anchor kept the bow pointed into the waves but did not stop the drift. When the storm finally cleared, the ocean was empty in all directions. There was no land visible. No ships. No aircraft. Alvarenga attempted to restart the motor one final time. It would not turn over. They had entered the north equatorial current. The drift had begun. The boat continued west at a steady pace. Alvarenga estimated they were moving at roughly 1 knot. Without navigation equipment, he could only guess their position. He knew they were far from shore. He did not know how far. The immediate problem was survival. They had no food. The small amount they had brought was gone. The water containers were less than half full. Alvarenga rationed carefully. Each man was allowed a few mouthfuls per day. Fish became the primary focus. Alvarenga had fished his entire adult life, but always with tackle and bait. Now he had neither. The tackle box had been lost during the storm. He fashioned hooks from bits of wire and metal, but they were crude and ineffective. He learned to catch fish by hand. Small fish would gather in the shadow of the boat. He would wait until they came close to the surface, then plunge his hand into the water and grab. The technique required patience. Most attempts failed. But some succeeded. The fish were eaten raw. Alvarenga bit into the flesh immediately after catching them. He chewed slowly. The taste was strong but bearable. Córdoba struggled with this. He gagged on the first attempts. Alvarenga insisted. There was no alternative. Birds began landing on the boat. They were seabirds, likely boobies or frigate birds. They showed no fear. Alvarenga caught them with his hands. He wrung their necks quickly. The meat was tougher than fish but more substantial. He ate everything except the feathers. Turtles appeared occasionally. Alvarenga would grab them when they surfaced near the boat. He killed them by severing the neck. He drank the blood first. It was salty but provided liquid. Then he carved the meat from the shell. He ate the liver raw. It tasted bitter and oily but was rich in nutrients. The icebox, now empty, became their only shelter from the sun. They would crawl inside during the hottest hours of the day. The space was cramped. They lay curled in the heat, conserving energy. Córdoba began to weaken in the second week. Rain became their only source of fresh water. When storms passed, Alvarenga collected every drop possible. He used plastic bottles, containers, and any surface that could channel water into storage. The 55-gallon icebox became the primary reservoir. When rain fell, he tilted the lid to funnel water inside. He removed his shirt and spread it across the opening to filter debris. The system was crude but functional. There were periods without rain. These dry spells lasted days, sometimes longer. The water supply would dwindle. Alvarenga reduced the ration further. He and Córdoba would go 24 hours or more without drinking. Alvarenga discovered that turtle blood could supplement water intake. The blood was thick and heavily salted, but it contained liquid. He would drain it into containers after killing a turtle. Córdoba refused to drink it at first. Later, he had no choice. The sun was relentless. The boat had no shade except for the icebox. The fiberglass hull absorbed heat. The metal edges became too hot to touch during midday. Both men developed burns on exposed skin. Their lips cracked and bled. Alvarenga tried to maintain discipline around water. He knew that panic or carelessness could kill them faster than thirst. He stored every container carefully. He marked levels to track consumption. He enforced the ration even when Córdoba begged for more. At night, the temperature dropped. Condensation would form on metal surfaces. Alvarenga wiped it with cloth and wrung the moisture into his mouth. The amount was minimal but he wasted nothing. He urinated into the ocean, never into the boat. He insisted Córdoba do the same. Keeping the hull clean mattered. Disease or infection would spread quickly in the confined space. The routine around water became ritualized. Every rainstorm was an event. They would prepare in advance, positioning containers and stripping down to use their clothing as collection surfaces. When the rain stopped, they would inventory what they had gathered. Water determined everything. It governed their energy, their decisions, their hope. Days began to blur together. Alvarenga stopped counting after the first month. There was no calendar. No meaningful way to mark time. The sun rose and set. The moon cycled. That was all. He developed a pattern. Morning was for hunting. He would watch the water for fish shadows. He kept his hands ready. When a fish came close, he struck. His success rate improved with practice. Some days he caught 3 or 4. Other days none. Birds remained easier targets. They would land on the gunwale or the edge of the icebox. Alvarenga moved slowly. He kept his breathing steady. When a bird settled, he would wait several seconds, then grab. The motion had to be quick. If he hesitated, the bird would lift off. He learned which species were easiest to catch. Boobies were less cautious than frigate birds. Terns rarely landed long enough. He adapted his technique to each type. Córdoba helped initially. He would position himself on one side of the boat while Alvarenga worked the other. They would signal silently when a bird approached. But Córdoba's coordination began to fail. His movements became slow and uncertain. By the second month, Córdoba spent most of his time inside the icebox. He complained of stomach pain. He vomited frequently, even when there was little in his stomach. Alvarenga gave him small portions of fish. Córdoba could barely keep them down. The psychological toll on Córdoba was visible. He spoke less. He stared at the horizon for hours without moving. He asked Alvarenga repeatedly how far they had drifted. Alvarenga had no answer. Alvarenga's own mental state remained focused on tasks. He did not allow himself to consider rescue. He thought only about the next meal, the next rainfall, the next day. This narrow focus kept him functional. He talked to himself. He recited prayers he remembered from childhood. He sang songs quietly. The sound of his own voice became a tool against silence. At night, he would lie in the hull and watch the stars. He did not know their names or how to navigate by them. But their presence was something fixed. The stars did not drift. Córdoba began refusing food in the third month. Córdoba's decline accelerated. He stopped eating entirely. Alvarenga offered him fish, bird meat, even turtle liver. Córdoba turned away. He said he could not swallow. He said his throat was closed. Alvarenga forced water into his mouth during rainstorms. Córdoba would let it spill out. He had given up. This was clear to Alvarenga. He had seen it before in other contexts. A person decides they are finished. The body follows. Córdoba spoke about his mother. He asked Alvarenga to tell her what happened. He described his village. He talked about God. His voice was weak. The conversations were fragmented. Alvarenga tried to keep him engaged. He told stories about fishing. He described meals he would eat when they were rescued. He insisted rescue was possible. Córdoba did not respond. In early March, approximately 4 months after departure, Córdoba stopped speaking. He lay in the bottom of the boat. His breathing was shallow. Alvarenga checked him periodically. There was nothing he could do. Córdoba died on a morning that Alvarenga could not date with certainty. He simply stopped breathing. Alvarenga placed his hand on Córdoba's chest and felt no movement. He waited. Nothing changed. Alvarenga did not remove the body immediately. He sat beside it for the rest of that day. He was not sure why. Perhaps it was respect. Perhaps it was the realization that he was now completely alone. He spoke to the body over the next several days. He continued conversations they had started when Córdoba was alive. He asked questions and answered them himself. The responses were in Córdoba's voice as Alvarenga remembered it. On the 6th day, the smell became unbearable. Alvarenga knew he could not keep the body longer. He prayed over Córdoba. He asked for forgiveness. Then he lifted the body and rolled it over the side. Córdoba sank immediately. The ocean accepted him without ceremony. Alvarenga watched the surface for a moment. Then he turned back to the boat. He was alone now. Completely. The fact settled over him like a physical weight. The solitude was total. Alvarenga had spent his adult life in relative isolation, but this was different. There was no possibility of human contact. No voices. No faces. Only the boat and the ocean. He began seeing things that were not there. Shadows on the water became ships. Cloud formations became islands. He would stand and wave, shouting for help. Then the mirage would dissolve. He would sit back down. The hallucinations increased in frequency. He saw Córdoba standing at the bow. He saw his daughter calling to him from the waves. He saw entire cities rising from the horizon. His mind was producing what it needed. He understood this but could not stop it. Cargo ships passed in the distance. These were real. Alvarenga could see their hulls and superstructures clearly. He estimated they were several miles away, sometimes closer. He stood and waved his shirt. He shouted until his voice gave out. The ships continued on their routes. They did not alter course. He tried to calculate why they did not see him. The boat was small and low to the water. At a distance of even 2 miles, it would be nearly invisible. The white fiberglass blended with wave crests. There was no flag, no reflective surface, no way to signal effectively. He counted at least 6 ships over the following months. Each sighting brought a surge of hope followed by crushing disappointment. He began to understand that passing ships were not a solution. He was too small. The ocean was too large. His body continued to function but was deteriorating. His weight dropped significantly. He had no way to measure it, but his ribs became visible. His arms thinned. His face hollowed. His hair and beard grew long. He did not cut them. There was no reason to. His fingernails grew and broke. His skin was damaged by constant sun exposure. Sores developed on his arms and legs. Some became infected. He washed them with seawater. Most healed slowly. He lost teeth. They loosened and fell out. He assumed this was due to malnutrition. He did not dwell on it. Pain was constant now. He had learned to function through it. Time lost meaning entirely. Alvarenga tracked time by the moon. Each full moon marked roughly 1 month. He began scratching marks into the side of the icebox. The marks accumulated. He counted them periodically. After 13 marks, he stopped counting. The current carried him steadily west. He had no way to measure distance, but he knew he had traveled thousands of miles. The water temperature had changed. The species of fish were different. Even the birds were not the same ones he had seen near Mexico. His physical condition had stabilized at a diminished baseline. He was emaciated but functional. His body had adapted to the deprivation. He required less food than before. His metabolism had slowed. The hunting routine continued. He caught fish almost daily now. His technique had been refined through months of practice. He could anticipate their movements. His hands moved without conscious thought. Birds still landed on the boat. He caught them with the same efficiency. He ate them raw, consuming everything including the organs. Nothing was wasted. Rain came in cycles. He had learned to read the sky. Certain cloud formations preceded rain by several hours. He would prepare his collection system in advance. His storage capacity was now maximized. He kept the icebox 3/4 full when possible. He thought about death often. Not with fear, but with curiosity. He wondered how it would happen. Starvation seemed unlikely now. He had proven he could sustain himself indefinitely. Dehydration was possible if the rain stopped for an extended period. Disease or infection could develop. A storm could capsize the boat. He considered the possibility that he might never be rescued. That he would drift until the boat disintegrated or until his body finally failed. The thought was not unbearable. It was simply a fact to be considered. He talked to God. He had not been particularly religious in his previous life, but now he prayed daily. The prayers were not requests for rescue. They were conversations. He thanked God for rain. He asked for strength to continue. He prayed for his daughter. His daughter became a focal point. He thought about her constantly. He imagined her life in El Salvador. He wondered if she believed he was dead. He spoke to her out loud, describing what he was experiencing. These one-sided conversations sustained him. He made a decision during this period. He would not give up. Whatever happened, he would continue. The decision was not emotional. It was practical. Giving up meant dying. He was not ready to die. On January 29, 2014, Alvarenga saw something on the horizon that did not disappear. It was a dark line, distinct from clouds. It remained fixed as hours passed. He watched it carefully. He did not allow himself to believe it was land. By the following morning, the shape had clarified. Mountains. He could see their outline against the sky. The current was carrying him toward them. The distance closed slowly over the next 24 hours. The mountains grew larger. He began to see details. Vegetation. A shoreline. The landmass was real. On January 30th, the boat drifted close enough that Alvarenga could see beaches. The island was small, heavily forested, with a lagoon visible beyond the reef. He did not know where he was. He had no context for the geography. The boat approached the reef line. Waves broke against coral formations. Alvarenga knew he could not navigate the reef in the boat. He would have to swim. He slipped over the side. The water was warm. He began swimming toward shore. The distance was several hundred meters. His body was weak, but the motion was familiar. He had swum these distances before, in another life. He reached the beach and crawled onto sand. He lay there for several minutes. The sand was solid beneath him. It did not move. After 14 months on a drifting boat, the stillness was disorienting. He stood and walked inland. He saw structures. Small buildings. A path. He followed the path and encountered two women. They appeared startled. He called out in Spanish. They did not understand. One of the women ran. The other stayed, watching him from a distance. Alvarenga sat down. He waited. He was too exhausted to do anything else. Within an hour, more people arrived. A man who spoke limited English approached. Alvarenga tried to explain where he had come from. The man listened but seemed confused. Alvarenga gestured toward the ocean. He said, Mexico. He said, 14 months. The island was Ebon Atoll in the Marshall Islands. He had drifted approximately 5,500 miles across the Pacific Ocean. He had been at sea for 438 days. The residents of Ebon Atoll provided Alvarenga with food and water. He ate slowly. His stomach could not handle large quantities. He vomited after the first meal. They gave him smaller portions. Rice. Fish. Coconut water. He was taken by boat to Majuro, the capital of the Marshall Islands, the following day. Medical personnel examined him at the hospital. His vital signs were weak but stable. He was severely malnourished. His weight was estimated at 125 pounds. He had weighed approximately 180 pounds before departure. He suffered from anemia, dehydration, and multiple infections. His liver showed signs of damage, likely from consuming raw fish liver over an extended period. His skin exhibited severe sun damage and scarring. Several teeth were missing. His hair and beard were matted and long. Doctors noted that despite his condition, he was able to walk and communicate. His mental state appeared functional, though he showed signs of trauma. He spoke coherently about his experience. He provided details about Córdoba's death and the drift trajectory. The story reached international media within days. Reporters questioned the validity of his account. Some suggested it was impossible to survive 14 months at sea. Others pointed to inconsistencies in the timeline. Alvarenga maintained his version of events. He described the hunting techniques, the water collection, the hallucinations, the passing ships. Oceanographers analyzed the currents and confirmed that a drift from the Mexican coast to the Marshall Islands was plausible. The North Equatorial Current flows west at speeds consistent with his account. The distance and duration aligned with known current patterns. The government of El Salvador arranged for his return. He flew from Majuro to Honolulu, then to El Salvador. He arrived in early February 2014. His family met him at the airport. His daughter was there. She was now a teenager. He had not seen her in over a year. The reunion was brief and quiet. Cameras recorded the moment. Alvarenga appeared overwhelmed. He spoke little. He embraced his daughter and wept. He was taken to a hospital in El Salvador for further treatment. He remained there for several weeks. The physical recovery was gradual. The psychological recovery was less clear. In the months that followed, he struggled with attention and scrutiny. He gave interviews but grew tired of repeating the story. He withdrew from public view. He moved to a small town. He attempted to resume a normal life. The ocean had changed him in ways that were not visible. The distance José Salvador Alvarenga traveled across the Pacific Ocean has been estimated at between 5,500 and 6,700 miles. The exact figure cannot be determined. There was no GPS. No tracking device. Only the currents and his account. 438 days is longer than most human beings could imagine surviving alone at sea. It exceeds nearly every documented case of ocean survival. The physical endurance required is extreme. The mental endurance is perhaps greater. What allowed him to survive when Córdoba did not is unclear. Some have suggested it was physical constitution. Others point to psychological resilience. Alvarenga himself has offered no definitive answer. He survived because he continued. That is the only explanation he has given. The ocean is indifferent to human life. It does not sustain and does not destroy with intention. It simply exists. Alvarenga understood this. He did not expect the ocean to save him. He did not blame it for his suffering. He adapted to its conditions and endured. His story raises questions about the limits of human survival. About what the body can withstand when pushed beyond normal thresholds. About what the mind does when isolated from all external reference points. There is no triumph in his survival. He lost a companion. He lost more than a year of his life. He suffered in ways that left permanent marks. What he gained was simply continuation. He lived when he might have died. The boat that carried him across the Pacific eventually washed ashore and was left to decay. The ocean that nearly killed him continues its cycles, indifferent and vast. Alvarenga still lives in El Salvador. He does not fish anymore. He avoids the ocean. The experience remains with him, though he speaks of it rarely now. The Pacific stretches west from Mexico without interruption. The current still flows. Other boats still depart. The conditions that created his ordeal have not changed. The story ends not with resolution, but with silence.